They say the city never sleeps, but I say it never stops inspiring. Welcome to Sew and Tell, where every stitch has a story and every story has a little sparkle. Today's look, a little vintage sass, a dash of city sparkle, and a whole lot of homemade heart, inspired by the fearless fashion of Sex and the City, but stitched with soul, not designer labels. So grab a cuppa, settle in, and let's talk style, stories, and the magic of making it yourself. 20 years ago, I flew to New York for the ultimate treat, a Sex and the City tour. I wanted a little glamour, a little adventure, and maybe, just maybe, a touch of Carrie Bradshaw's magic. I've always loved how Sex and the City made fashion feel like freedom. This piece is my ode to Carrie's boldness, with a plentiful bead twist. There weren't many of us on the tour bus, and the men outweighed the women by 3 to 1. However, that did not distract from the excitement that we all felt, knowing that we would be, amongst other things, visiting Carrie's iconic brownstone, the Magnolia Bakery, Aidan and Steve's bar for a quick cosmopolitan, and many shops and boutiques. Then, somewhere between Fifth Avenue and a vintage shop, tucked down a side street, I found her. A beautiful skirt, too big, too bold, and just $10. I didn't hesitate. I knew I could make her mine. A few stitches, a little reshaping, and suddenly she felt like a dream. Although I made these alterations 20 years ago, I'm going to show you just how easy it was to make this skirt fit me perfectly. I still wear her today, and she makes me feel like I'm telling the world, I'm here, I'm bold, I'm fabulous. And I made this with love, like I'm channeling my inner Carrie, only with a sewing machine instead of stilettos. If you find a vintage or thrifted piece that's not quite your size, don't walk away. A few simple alterations can turn it into a forever favourite, just like I did. As I've already said, I made these alterations 20 years ago. But the first thing we're going to do is decide by how much you need to take the skirt in. So I suggest you pop it on and place a pin where it fits snugly. And then, as you can see here, you just need to take your tape measure and measure from the seam to the pin, and that will show you by just how much you need to take the skirt in. It's best to turn it inside out to do this. And this skirt was actually lined, so we're going to have to alter the skirt and the lining too. Take your tape measure from the stitch seam and mark with a pin by how much you need to take it in. Place pins all the way up the skirt and the lining, using the same measurement from the seam. If you prefer, you can use a fabric pen and then draw a sewing line, which might help. This pen that I've used here is heat activated, so once you've finished sewing your line by joining all the dots, you can gently press with the iron as the heat will make the ink disappear. I've linked the pens below if you're interested. Set your sewing machine up to sew a straight line. To set my machine up for a straight line, I need a tension of 3.5 on this dial, and I've selected number 8 for the stitch length. I'm using a sample piece of fabric here to show you how to do a straight stitch because, as I've said, I've already altered my skirt. This particular fabric is prone to fraying, but we will take this into consideration when we make the alteration. The average seam allowance is 1.5 centimetres, and we can use this gauge on your sewing machine. The measurement comes from where the needle is to the line on the gauge, which is where you're going to line up the edge of your fabric when you start sewing. If it helps, you can use some tape or masking tape to extend the line on the gauge all the way across your sewing machine to help you keep your fabric lined up. Remember to backstitch at the start and the end of your stitching, probably by about 3 stitches. To solve any issues you might have with fraying, we need to set the zigzag stitch by changing the tension again, and also the stitch. This is where your sewing machine manual is your best friend. For my sewing machine, the tension for the zigzag needs to be set at 4, and I've chosen zigzag stitch 3. Before I start sewing the zigzag stitch, I've cut about 1/2 centimetre off the edge. You can do this either before you do your zigzag stitch or afterwards, it depends how comfortable you feel. Once you're ready to start the zigzag stitch, set your sewing machine up and line up the edge of your fabric with the edge of your presser foot to keep it in a nice straight line, and start slowly. The sewing machine does all the work for you, just guide it in a straight line. You can trim it at this point too if you want to, but just be careful that you don't cut through your stitching. If you don't feel confident doing a zigzag stitch, that's absolutely fine. You can use pinking shears. I've linked these below if you prefer to use these, but again, cut about 1 centimetre away from your seam line, and that will stop the fabric from fraying even when it's been washed. Using the pinking shears is really quick and very easy. As you can see, I didn't use zigzag stitch or pinking shears as this particular fabric doesn't fray, but I did use a zigzag stitch on the lining as that's notorious for fraying. But after many years of washing and wearing, it's fared really well. And that's this one done. And here she is in all her glory. I hope my tutorial has helped a little and given you some confidence to make that purchase, knowing that you can make it yours. Whether it's a £10 treasure or a vintage gem, it's all about seeing the potential and making it feel like you. Don't be afraid to play, tweak and stitch your story into every seam. You've got the eye, the hand and the heart, and that's what makes it magic. I even had shoes that matched perfectly. How lucky was that?